Could you just tell me your name and where you live and your age?
My name's TJ Witt. I'm 43 years old. Lived up on top of Beacon Mountain up there, up above upper village of Beacon.
This is Post reporter Brady Dennis speaking to TJ Witt on Sunday. They're outside a church in Swannanoa, North Carolina.
They said you also lost a lot. What happened to your
house? Slid down the mountain, about 60 feet, with my whole family in it. But we made it out by God's grace. We made it out.
Witt's house slid down a mountain in the western part of the state.
We're more fortunate than most here because we were able to go back in, get our clothes, get our personal belongings, stuff that's most important to us, our wedding rings.
And so
pictures, birth certificates, Social Security cards, just the things that's essential.
Right.
We grabbed those and got out.
But the house is
gone.
Okay.
Nothing left. We can't. No recovering.
Man.
Hurricane Helene made landfall last Thursday in Florida, and it then moved north. It dumped 2 or more feet of rain in some parts of North Carolina, triggering flash floods and landslides. Witt has lived on family land for over 2 decades, but now his home is completely destroyed. But Witt says he's the lucky one.
Thank God we were up the mountain, so we didn't get flooded, but obviously the landslides. We had about 4 or 5 landslides on our mountain. So we got other family members that didn't make it. And my mother-in-law's cousins, they didn't make it.
Okay. I'm really sorry to hear that. And it just sounds like there's a lot of people not accounted for still.
It's going to be bad. Yeah, so we're just going to try to do what we can do to take care of everybody.
Yeah.
So, Brady, I wanted to ask you, what was your reaction to that?
I mean, how do you react to that? I mean, it's of a scale that's almost difficult to really put into words. But all you had to do was turn around where we were standing there and look down the hill a little ways and see where the river had just scooped up many people's homes and dumped them on the side of the road and turned them upside down and put cars into trees and just completely wiped away businesses. So, I mean, I think just like the people there that day, I was just beginning to understand, the scope of this and how bad it really is.
In Florida, ocean surges reached 15 feet in some areas. The water carried away cars and homes. In Georgia, winds reached up to 80 miles per hour and rain blanketed the state. In North Carolina, Helene carved a devastating path, turning rivers into walls of water, leveling entire towns. And Brady has been in the thick of it.
I only have a limited picture of the extent of the damage because the communication has been so tough and the terrain is so difficult to navigate, especially since so many roads have been washed out and bridges destroyed and that kind of thing. But this is a place that is obviously mountainous, and there are rivers that run through these valleys, and I think they just swelled to unbelievable heights and took everything in their path along with them. And I think we're still trying to understand the extent of that.
From the newsroom of The Washington Post, this is Post Reports. I'm Elahe Izadi. It's Tuesday, October 1st. Today, a storm like none other. Millions of people lost power. Communities are still in crisis. In some places, people still have no access to clean drinking water. As of Tuesday afternoon, more than 100 people have been confirmed dead. Search and rescue efforts are continuing, with hundreds still reported missing. Today, I connect with Brady, who explains Hurricane Helene's path of destruction. He'll take us to places that few have been able to get to right now, and he'll talk about the long road to recovery for communities that will never be the same. Brady, I really want to thank you for taking time to talk with us. I understand that it's been really hard to get in touch with, people from the outside world. Cell service has been spotty. There's limited to no internet. Can you just tell me a little bit about how difficult the communications have been?
Yeah, in our modern world, it's a really strange feeling to be essentially cut off from the rest of the world, and that for me has kind of come and gone as I've gone in and out of the worst parts of the hurricane zone here. But for many people, it's just basically a blackout. Like I'll go into these towns and communities and find that the people there have no idea what might have happened 2 or 3 miles, 4 miles away. And then when I do leave to go file stories or reach back out to folks outside, I find that people are desperately trying to find their friends and family where the hurricane hit. They don't always know where they are, whether they're safe, whether they left. It's definitely been really sort of like a key factor of the last few days here. Mm-hmm. Just this desperation to know more and to check on people you love.
Before we get more into hearing from the people you've spoken to in the past few days in your reporting on the ground in North Carolina, can you walk me through the path that Hurricane Helene took? When it made landfall, where that happened, and where did it go from there?
The storm came ashore in the Big Bend area of Florida.
Hurricane Helene ravaging the coastline, the strongest on record ever to hit the Big Bend area of Florida, coming ashore tonight as a monster Category 4 storm.
It was moving fast, and so it kind of just barreled up through that part of Florida and into Georgia, past, Atlanta, up around, Greenville, Spartanburg area of South Carolina, and then just smacked into these mountains of western North Carolina, and I should say also Tennessee, eastern Tennessee.
In Tennessee, catastrophic stormwater raging downstream. More than 30 people still missing.
And I believe also parts of Virginia. We're obviously still grappling with, how far-reaching the effects are. But one thing is that it really moved fast, except it dumped a lot of rain here on a place that had already seen a lot of rain. And all of those factors together were just, obviously overwhelming.
And Brady, you and I are talking late Tuesday morning. I know things are changing. We're learning more and more. At this point, what do we know about the overall death toll and the extent of the devastation from Helene?
So as far as we know, or at least as far as I know where I sit here today, the death toll officially has risen above 100 from this storm. Most of those deaths, obviously, in western North Carolina. But I just, like other folks here, have a feeling that number is destined to climb. And I saw myself crews going, fire rescue crews going through towns and spray painting doors, once they had checked each house. And
sorry, when you say spray painting doors, what do you mean?
Yeah, so in really heavily hit, flooded neighborhoods, fire and rescue teams will often put an orange spray paint X on a house that they've checked for people alive or not alive.
Oh, wow.
Houses, vehicles that were flooded, one by one, they are meticulously going through these communities and checking every place where someone might be. So that work, I think, is probably not nearly over, and I think we're destined to see that toll go up some. But hopefully not too much.
Yeah. So Brady, I want to learn more about this place you visited, Swannanoa, where you met TJ Witt. That's who we heard from at the beginning of this episode. His house had slid down a mountain in a mudslide. How was it for you trying to reach this community?
It, at the time, had been really difficult, and I had failed on the first day I tried to get there. By the second day, a few more roads were open, and I was able to get there and talk and visit with people. And the amazing thing is that this little town, which lies just to the east of Asheville, is really right off Interstate 40. It's not, in the backwoods off some winding road. This is a very accessible place. This is where you stop for gas or a bite to eat, when you're traveling through the mountains. The interstate was closed in multiple directions, and bridges had washed away or mudslides had covered the road, and it was just really slow going. Swannanoa is a much more quiet working class town, not so far from Asheville. And this is not often where, tourists come. This is where people have, in many ways, lived all their lives in this little valley right by the Swannanoa River with mountains on either side. And it's beautiful. And even folks who have been there their whole life had not seen, anything approaching this. I mean, one couple that I happened upon the first day I had arrived in North Carolina had fled from Swannanoa. And they told me that they had lived in their house almost 40 years and not once had it flooded. And after Helene, they had to race out as the water crept toward the top of their front door. I mean, inside, 5-6 feet inside.
Jeez.
So there's really for people who are alive now, there's really no precedent for this.
Yeah. Brady, I also understand you spoke with a pair of people, Jake Mole and Justin Kuhn. Can you tell me about them? Where are they from and what did they tell you?
Yeah, so this was a little place about 20 or 25 miles from Asheville. It's a pair of communities known as Lake Lure, and right next to that is Chimney Rock, and also a very sort of picturesque community. A lot of tourists and retirees. There's a state park where people hike up to the top of Chimney Rock and look out over the mountains, and a little village down below. I had been determined to get there, because this was one of the places that had been so hard to reach. All the roads in were blocked. And on Monday, I had finally found one way to get close. And Jake and Justin are these two guys who run a dock company basically on Lake Lure. They build and maintain docks for the homes along the lake. And I just happened upon them when I made it to Lake Lure. They were on literally the only boat on the lake that day, which, if you know this place, is just astounding. It's a very
a popular place for people to go out in the water. Mm-hmm.
Totally.
And so what we're seeing in that big massive floating debris up there, that's the town of Chimney Rock.
Pretty much,
yeah. Somewhere over here on the left is an ice cream machine from the ice cream place.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's the only thing we've been able to identify.
One of the coolers that says Hershey's on it. That's what's sitting over there. I'm like, I know where that came from. Everything else is unidentifiable. It's just a big, giant mass of brown wood.
The lake on that day was just at least part of it completely full of debris, like an ocean full of debris. And what it was essentially the remains of the town of Chimney Rock, which was just up the river and had, by all accounts anyway, been just flattened and carried away. So we very carefully, motored in their pontoon boat over to the debris field, which was massive. I don't know, half a mile in any direction. And we just spent some time looking at what was there. I mean, the most part of it was just, splintered wood from all the buildings that no longer existed.
We had Old Rock Cafe, and next to that you had there was a coffee shop, and then there was the ice cream place. Next to that, still headed north, there was Michael's or some beachwear thing, a Mexican restaurant. Then next to that was what used to be Jenny's, but was now Highlands. And then after that was Chimney Rock Brewing, and all of that's gone.
But then you look at some of the smaller things and you think about, the stories that were attached to those. Like there was like a pair of green children's Crocs floating in the water, and like a rocking chair, and a coolers and throw pillows from someone's living room probably, and a mannequin from some store that had been downtown, and a Hershey's ice cream freezer from the ice cream shop that had been in Chimney Rock.
I mean, I can't imagine seeing that sight. How are Jake and Justin coping with all of this?
I mean, I think they were primarily on the lake, not just to look at stuff, but they were gathering up propane tanks and gas cans that had found their way into the lake, and they were checking on customers' docks and boats. So they were just trying to do what they could, I think, to do something and to press forward. But there was a little bit of shell shock, and I think they didn't quite know how to describe what they were seeing before them in this place that had suddenly become so unfamiliar.
Brady, I understand you also met 2 women in Lake Lure.
Well, I'm sorry, I meant to ask your name at the beginning.
Oh, who are you?
I'm Brady Dennis. I'm from the Washington Post.
Oh.
But I'm from North Carolina, so this is kind of home.
My name is Beth.
Beth, B-E-T-H?
Right.
What's your last name, Beth?
H-E-E-R.
There's Beth, who's 61, and then there's Jan Hyslop.
How old are you, ma'am?
40. 76.
Okay. Have you lived here in Lake Lure a long time?
20 years.
Okay.
Brady, what did they tell you about their experience?
They felt very alone because they can't reach the outside world, and they don't often understand in the early days of this disaster, like, where is the help? Why isn't anyone coming to bring aid or to help us dig out of here?
How would you describe how alone people have felt here in the days since the storm?
Yeah, because there's no communication.
And so one thing Beth had done was post a list, she said, at the nearby grocery store with people that she wanted to check on and their contact information, and she was encouraging other neighbors to add names.
We are a small town. I'm forgiving of that. I am. And, it's the people that make it great. But we need a way that I would have knocked on doors. I'd put a notebook up at Ingalls and ask people to write missing people, to write any tips they have.
And we've seen a lot of variations of this in many places. People are posting on Facebook, trying to reach people. People have asked me, can you check on this person if you go to this place? People have shared addresses with me, and they're just trying any way they can to check on the people that they care about.
Mm-hmm.
People have also very much tried to be there for each other, and they've sat and outside and grilled all the food in their freezer before it goes bad and handed it out to neighbors. And I've seen people set up folding tables in their driveways and make spray painted signs like free supplies, take anything you want.
Brady, you're obviously one of several Post reporters who have been covering this hurricane from on the ground in North Carolina. And I wanted to play you some audio from one of our colleagues, Scott Dance, who spoke with the mayor of Canton, North Carolina, Mayor Zeb Smathers.
Mm-hmm. The last time a flood like this hit Canton was in the book of Genesis and Noah. Mm-hmm. This is the worst one ever. And I think people realize that if this is the new normal, then we have to prepare that it's like it's the new normal. And I think that
Scott also asked whether the mayor now considers this region of North Carolina to be part of Hurricane Alley, which is an area hundreds of miles away in the Gulf of Mexico, where hurricanes are much more common.
How can I not? And that is absolutely crazy, but I think that's a new reality. And I think part of leadership demands that you have to make decisions and plan not in the world that you wish that was, but the world that is.
Mm.
What do you think of that?
I mean, it's a really good question, and it's one that a lot of folks are asking around here. And I don't know how to put this into context. I mean, I think what the mayor said was really profound and true. I think it was about 2 years ago, I had gone to Canton and I had talked to Mayor Smathers a year after Tropical Storm Fred had caused some really bad flooding in that area and really taken people's homes and upended a lot of things in that corner of the mountains. And at the time, we talked about how nothing like that had happened there in a long time. And then just 2 years later, this is something of an entirely different magnitude and scale. And so it does make you wonder, and I think a lot of people here are wondering, is this some outlier event that people will talk about for the next 100 years? Or is it one of, whatever storms are going to keep passing through in the years and decades ahead.
After the break, Brady and I talk about if this kind of weather is the new normal for communities across the U.S. and whether or not they're prepared. We'll be right back. So, Brady, at this point, I would like to step back and just understand the bigger picture context here when we're thinking about how unprecedented this level of weather-related damage is for, let's say, the southeastern United States or these states where they're seeing this hurricane damage like North Carolina. Is this truly unprecedented, what we're seeing today from Hurricane Helene?
The honest answer is I don't know. I think it's unprecedented here for this region. I think people here will talk about the before and the after of this. You know what I mean? Like, this will be a real line of things that were before Helene and after Helene. I think we're still getting, our arms around how much destruction there is and how different this place will look like in the years to come. But I think putting the word unprecedented on it, anyone would have a hard time arguing against that. Yeah.
What can you tell us about what recovery has looked like across the Southeast?
So I can tell you that I'm definitely the wrong person to ask about that, because I, like so many people here, have had limited, access to the outside world and to the other coverage that our colleagues and others are doing out there. What I can say is, anecdotal, which is that in the days that I've been here in Western North Carolina, it's very clear to me that a lot of help is rolling in, in the form of, caravans of food and water trucks, and there are a constant hum of helicopters bringing supplies to these communities that were virtually cut off.
Yeah. And it feels strange for me to be the one to tell you this, Brady, but because I have access to the internet and have no problem accessing this information, we do know that President Joe Biden did speak on Monday saying that he was going to add more resources, including thousands of federal responders. And in Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis said, essentially, we have what we need, and we're going to send some support to the harder hit areas in North Carolina.
Oh, wow. See, I always get my news from Post News. And again, today I've gotten it directly from Post News.
There you go. Brady, I think a lot of people listening to us and hearing about this damage in North Carolina in places that haven't seen this level of devastation from a hurricane are wondering, is this because of climate change? Like, is this extreme weather the result of climate change? So what can we say right now about the role climate change has played in this?
The caveat is, it's hard to say that any one weather event is climate change. Climate change is something that plays out over time and shifts the baseline over time on certain kinds of weather. Now, that said, we do know with certainty that the warming oceans, the warming atmosphere are creating more intense storms and hurricanes that rapidly intensify, which is exactly what happened with Helene. And we do also know that, a key component of climate change is more heat and moisture in the air, which is leading to these really torrential rainfalls that I bet everyone listening has experienced at some point. So when you combine all that, Helene had all those elements. There was really sort of biblical rain in the days before Helene in this part of the world. I think North Carolina's state climatologist told our colleagues this has the fingerprints of climate change on it. And I think that's a good way to think about it. Like, it's a hard thing to say yes or no to, but it's the kind of storm we can expect more often in a world with climate change.
what about how prepared or unprepared these regions were for this kind of weather event? I'm thinking about disaster preparedness, which is usually something that falls to local or state or federal governments. Were they prepared? Were these towns, were these communities, were these states prepared? Did they have enough resources?
Yes, I think this is something that, so many colleagues at the Post have been doing some really great work on, and folks elsewhere. And I think this is going to be one of the main questions going forward. I mean, I think what we can say in general is that no, North Carolina and many of its communities were not prepared at all for a disaster of this magnitude and of this kind, right? That's very clear just by the devastation that we have seen in the wake of Helene. It's a little trickier, I guess, at this point to know what prepared means and what prepared looks like when a storm like this hits. I mean, it is, as we were talking about earlier, really unprecedented here and of a magnitude that people have not seen in their lifetimes. And in a landscape like the mountains, there are really tricky questions. I think there's some really legitimate questions about, when people were told to evacuate or leave, or what alerts went out, and could people receive them in a place where the cell phone's reception and internet is not always so great? And should people have, heeded warning sooner or sent warning sooner? And those are all reasonable questions to ask. You also don't want people out on the roads, that are about to flood, at the last minute. So I think, yes, many places were unprepared. I think in the wake of the storm, no doubt that many places are under-resourced. And then there is a personal aspect to this. What do you do in your own land? Or do you leave earlier next time? Or, I think a lot of people are asking themselves a lot of questions about that as well.
And one thing I know about you, Brady, is that you are actually originally from North Carolina. So how are you feeling seeing all this destruction in your home state?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot, and I'm not sure I have a good answer. And it's strange. I am from Western North Carolina, and I grew up in this part of the state. And, my parents live here, and I've also been checking on friends and family with, mixed luck the last few days. And, it's a place that I always thought of in a different light. Like I hiked here and camped here as a kid and fished in the rivers with my dad. And, some of my best friends live here. Just this summer, we brought our kids here to hike up to the top of Chimney Rock and to visit this little village, which I was at yesterday and really doesn't exist anymore. So I'm not sure I've quite figured out how to feel about it. I will say that, it's strange to see a place you've known so well and people you care about, deal with something this. It's hard as a reporter to sort of maintain that distance from it, because I do care very deeply about this place, and I really feel for these people. And that's true anytime there's a disaster, but I think it hits a little differently when it's home.
Well, Brady, thanks so much for taking time to speak with us, and I hope, your family and friends are all okay.
They are. I feel very much like one of the lucky people, and I'm just glad my family and friends are all doing well and accounted for. And I just hope that we can keep shining a light on all the folks here who can't say that.
Stay safe, Brady.
Thank you. Take care.
Brady Dennis writes about the environment and climate for The Post. There's a lot of news today, so I wanted to share one other story with you. Tens of thousands of dock workers went on strike today, and the effects could ripple through the economy. The strike has already caused disruptions at ports along the East Coast and Gulf of Mexico. This morning, we saw stacks of shipping containers stranded on docks and ships idled outside harbors. Striking workers who belong to the International Longshoremen's Union want pay raises and protections against automation. They also say they deserve a greater share of profits, especially after working through the coronavirus pandemic. but they're locked in a dispute with shippers and port operators over a new contract. Business groups and Republicans have called for President Joe Biden to invoke his legal powers to try to force negotiations and end the strike. But so far, Biden isn't doing that, which is a boost to the union's position. Experts say the strike could cost the economy hundreds of millions of dollars a day and get worse as time goes on. It could lead to higher prices and shortages for some retailers. This all comes just 5 weeks before the presidential election, where the economy has been a big issue. And speaking of the presidential election, tonight we're going to see the first and likely only vice presidential debate this campaign season. It's between Democratic Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Republican Ohio Senator J.D. Vance. CBS News will host the debate, and it starts at 9 p.m. Eastern. You can also watch it live on WashingtonPost.com. And I'll be back tomorrow morning in your Post Reports feed with my colleague, politics reporter, and host of the Campaign Moment podcast, Aaron Blake. We'll talk debate highlights, and I'll get Aaron's analysis for how this might impact the presidential race. You should also follow the Campaign Moment podcast feed for exclusive episodes that really make sense of this chaotic election season. That's it for Post Reports. Thanks for listening. If you want to show your support for the show and the kind of in-depth reporting we do here, please subscribe to The Washington Post. Not only is it a great way to help us continue to do this work, but you can now get access to Washington Post podcasts ad-free in Apple Podcasts. Today's show was produced by Alana Gordon with help from Sabby Robinson. It was mixed by Sean Carter and edited by Rena Flores with help from Ariel Plotnick. Thanks to Scott Dance, Paulina Ferozi, and Katie Zezima. I'm Elahe Izadi. We'll be back tomorrow with more stories from The Washington Post.